If someone calls you tenacious, you're probably the kind of person who never gives up and never stops trying. Someone who does whatever is required to accomplish a goal. Check out this podcast.
It's a beautiful day in paradise, and this is Debbie coming to you from sunny South Florida, and it is wonderful today. I've had a little bit of rain, my flowers are happy, and all is good in South Florida. I just want to say last week's show, everybody, I interviewed my 93-year-old father for his birthday. It was his birthday, and what a hoot. It's a man that I love with all my heart, and he's had 93 years of experiences that none of us could talk about the way he did. He is funny. I encourage you to go to last week's show and just listen. If you listen to it on podcast, he's just a hoot. So Dr. Jack, you're in for another 7 years. That employment contract has you working for me until you're 100. So hang in there. Hang in there. My guest today, folks, is another man that I wrote down 9 lives, and he's on like number 7. My guest is Mr. Chad Osinga, Mr. Tenacity. Chad, welcome from, where are you? Virginia.
Well, thank you for having me. And yes, I'm in Fredericksburg, Virginia, so about an hour and a half south of DC.
Gotcha. Well, welcome. I don't know what Virginia. Actually, I'm going to Virginia next week for a wedding.
Hey, I'll be in Florida at the end of this month. There you go.
We'll pass. We should, well, I was going to say do a house swap, but I'm going to be up in Northern Virginia. Yeah. Anyway, Chad, welcome. And I've spent the last couple hours with you.
Yeah, I heard.
I told you, I do my research on my guests. And we met because I've been on your podcast.
Yes.
Which is called
The Legend of You.
The Legend of You. And we had a blast. And when we started talking, I'm like, I've got to have that man on my show. And the more I listened to what you talked about in the other shows, the more I realized that our lives are running parallel, running, perpendicular. We have so many things in common. And I believe that most people do if they would just listen to each other, talk, and have dialogue.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I really couldn't.
And I actually wrote an article last week for a Positive Tribe magazine, which is, I would love for you to be a contributor to that. It was about civility and respect. And I just got on my high horse because when I'm putting a production out for my dad's birthday, actually it was a thing for my company. I sent a promotion out and said, Dr. Jack's turning 93. We're going to have a 9.3% discount on all the products. And if you call him or write to him and wish him a happy birthday, you get a 93% or a $93 coupon towards your next purchase. It was so much fun. We got the greatest emails, the greatest calls until one. And one man wrote in and was so nasty to me. And I'm like, why? Where does this come from? Why do people fall back? And maybe we can talk about that. Why is the fallback on so many people nasty, vicious, being so negative? And this is not what the show is about today, but I got on that roll and I did hear you talk about mindset reset. Mm-hmm. And we will get into that because I think all of us need to pause and change the way we're thinking going forward.
Yeah, I'm big on mindset. It's saved my life. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but if it wasn't for that shift in my mindset, I was gonna stay negative, moving forward in my life. So, I probably have an answer of why he was like that, because there's always one, and it's internal, but before we get into this, happy birthday to your dad. That's amazing. 93 years. It is incredible. And I would love to contribute. I write for Authority Magazine a lot. I'm actually working on 2 articles for them as we speak. So you just let me know and I would love to contribute.
Absolutely. Well, it's that one moment, and we'll talk about this too, because writing has been important to you.
Yes.
I wrote in my journal, I think we talked about that on your show. I had 4,000 pages of journaling through this financial scam. And it was a release. I don't do that much anymore, but I love to write monthly with a little bit of pressure to get it out. but it's fun. It's a great release. And I put my headsets on and I listen to some classical music with no words, just the music, and just get it out. And I'm like you when you're on your motorcycle, just poof. All right. So we've kind of like skirted all around a lot of topics, and I want to hit on them. But Chad, restart. When I start my show, I love to get my guests to tell us where they grew up and siblings, no siblings. What was your family situation like when you were little?
So I was born in Virginia. I was born in a very small town called Stuart Straft, Virginia. It's in the Shenandoah Valley, and there's nothing but farms, maybe a few factories, and a corner store, right? Like we have like 3 stoplights, and that's about it. But I was the only child. I never knew my father. I actually just met my father this Father's Day after 40 years. But he had tried to find me. It's a long story, and I'm sure we can get into that, but never met him growing up. And then my mother, she was addicted to drugs. She had struggled with drug use way before I was ever born. When I was born with Erb's palsy. So the left side of my body wasn't functioning. And the doctor basically gave her an ultimatum and said, hey, you have to work with this kid or he'll never move the left side of his body ever again. This is just what you have to do. And so she took a small hiatus from the drugs to help me, but then she fell right back into it. And so I lived a life of poverty. I lived a life with no structure, no discipline, no direction. My mom just, as I grew older, she grew further and further into her drug habit, and it ended up going into crack cocaine. And when she shifted into that phase of her life, things got horribly bad. And at 14, my house was raided because she allowed drug dealers to come into our home. So the same people she's buying these drugs from, now she is allowing to live in our home. They had buried kilos of cocaine and crack in our backyard. I had no clue. And, it was just a bad situation. I looked up to them for a long period of my life because that's the only male figures that I really had. And I thought that's what success was. I thought that was what it was supposed to be. And if I could be like them, then I would not have the life that I lived, even though they lived in my house, right? It didn't make any sense now that I look back on it. But as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, and then into my early teenager stages, like that's what I thought was what it was. So the home was raided at 14. My mom went to federal prison, and I was sent to live with family in Oklahoma. And that was supposed to be a good situation, but it turned really south really quick. They used me as a paycheck. I didn't know that either at the time, but they were getting paid by the state to house me. And they had and I'm not against church at all, but they had a position in church, and they used that position as kind of like this authoritative manner, right? Like they couldn't be touched because of who they were in that church. And they really pushed that upon me, and then they began to abuse me physically and mentally. And it got to a point where I just couldn't take it anymore. It was a year and a half of, I'm talking when they would discipline me, we'll say, I would be bleeding, I would be black and blue, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't. And so I ran away. And the first time I got caught, but the second time I made it all the way from Oklahoma all the way back to Virginia, and I made it back. The state ended up arresting me, but then releasing me to custody with my aunt who was taking care of my grandmother. So, I eventually found stability in my later teenage years, but the damage was done. I was really upstairs. I was not in a good place, right? I was like that guy that called and was negative. I was negative. I couldn't see positive in life, right? So that was a little bit about how I kind of grew up.
Well, and it was interesting at that age, so too. Did you ever feel that you could speak up?
No.
There was no safe place to go.
No. I didn't feel. I used to look outside car windows and see birds and wish I was them so I could fly away.
Oh, goodness.
They would. All right. So when I was in Oklahoma, they wouldn't allow me to talk to anybody from Virginia. And if they did, the like couple times they did, they monitored the phone calls. And if I said anything or they said anything they didn't like, they would end the phone call. They read all of my mail before I was able to read it. They basically wouldn't allow me to talk to my mother while she was incarcerated. I think maybe once or twice. And again, it was monitored. There was no independent privacy. That's kind of how I got caught because they stuck me in the house for the most part, right? So there wasn't a lot of freedom. There was no one I could reach out to because I was just stuck in an environment where I knew no one but them, and they were in control.
It borders on child abuse.
Oh, it was.
Today, it would never. Well, I can't say it would never. This happened. Well, you're 40, so this happened a while ago.
Yes, yes.
But I think in time we're a little more sensitive to those things. But then again, there was somebody down here in Florida that had a kid locked up in a cage. So it's evil, and that power over a child is always evil in my mind. And it's such a shame because sometimes it is done in the name of religion. And I'm very faithful too. So I makes me cringe when I hear that, especially for young men, because now you've grown up with that. That's the norm. You've got the drug dealers and look at the mentors, quote unquote, that you had.
Right.
Not very good. So you tried to escape. You tried to run away from it all, and it didn't happen. And they picked you up and caught you. And not a good situation. What did Grandma say all through this?
So she was trying to reach me the entire time. All right. So when I was growing up, I failed to mention this part, but she was like my saving grace. So when my mom was strung out, she was always the person I could call because my mom would leave me for hours to go do drugs, buy drugs, whatever she did. And we didn't live in a good neighborhood. So I was always scared. And so I was always able to call her. She would pick me up from, high school, or not from high school, from elementary school, and buy me like milkshakes from Hardee's. I used to love that. So she was always a breath of fresh air. And when I was in Oklahoma, they wouldn't allow her really to talk to me. And so it bothered her greatly. And then when I ran away and I got back, the court said that she was too old to have custody of me. So that's when it went to my aunt, who was taking care of my grandmother. And, at that point, she was just sorry that was the case. But she, there was nothing she could really do.
Grandma, you really want to protect your grandkids, and because there's that. I mean, I have grandchildren and I love them to death, and I worry not about what's going on right now, but if things were to change, I'm not around to be there. And my daughter one time said, "Mom, would you be the guardian of the kids?" And I'm thinking, I would love to be, but I don't think I can. You need to find a younger one of your brothers, because at some point we do get old, and I get exhausted watching my grandkids. I love them to death, but that's why you can say, "Here you go, they're dead for years."
Yeah.
So you ended up joining the Army.
Yes.
Be all you can be. Safe place to go, right? Discipline.
Yeah.
How'd that go for you?
Well, I mean, it was the best decision I had made outside of marrying my wife. But
we'll get there too.
Yeah, but it wasn't wonderful off the get-go, right? Because I had no discipline, other than when I was in Oklahoma, but that was more of a negative, thing. So I didn't even associate discipline to something good, right? Like I always saw it as, a negative. And so coming into that was very hard. It was a big adjustment.
Why did you go military? Was there someone that encouraged that, or?
Oh yeah. So my wife is what kind of inspired me to become different. I met her in high school, and she ended up giving me an ultimatum to be different, right? She was like, if you want to be with me, you have to stop selling drugs. You have to get out of the streets. You have to do something better with your life. And so I did. And it was a process. And after our second child, we were living in low income housing. And I looked around and I was like, yeah, they'll grow up with loving parents, but they won't have any more opportunities than I had if I don't do something different. But I had dropped out of school in 9th grade. So I didn't have anything to leverage to give that better life. And I thought about my grandfather, who I looked up to. He was a Marine. He had fought in the Korean War and World War II, and I adored him. I thought that he was my hero. So I said, okay, Marines. And the Marines wouldn't accept me because I dropped out of high school and because I had tattoos all over my forearms. But the Army, they gave my name to an Army recruiter. They called me, and the Army takes anyone. So
Well, they used to.
yeah, well, yeah, back then they took me with open arms. They paid for me to get my GED and said, "Hey, we'll give you that life that you want." And off to the races I was. So I kind of already made that decision going into the recruiter's office. That was my only opportunity or chance to have something better for my family. So I was going to do it come hell or high water. That was the choice that I was going to make. So I came in ready. And so the recruiter didn't really have to do much for their paycheck when it came to me.
But basic training, I mean, I went through OTS, officer training, so it's a little bit different than basic. Explain what's the mental?
So yeah, I'm combat arms, and we go through OSET. So it's most Army jobs, you go through your basic training, and then you go through your job training, whatever that is. And when you go through your job training, it's a little more relaxed, but not when you're combat arms. If you're infantry, if you were a tanker, scout like I was, you went through, I think it was 12 weeks, maybe it was 16. It's been a long time. But it's basically basic training all the way through. So a lot of yelling, a lot of discipline, a lot of mental mind games, and them pushing you to and breaking you down, right? To be the person that they want you to be. And that's really the aim. They understand that you are combat arms. You're going to have to experience things that are pretty intense. So they break you down, and they rebuild you back up into the individual that they want you to be. And it doesn't always work out like that for all the people in basic training. There's a lot of people that, struggle even more than I did, but I accepted it. I got to a point that I realized I couldn't go back, right? Like, I had made this decision, as hard as it might have been for me. I had to figure this thing out and make the best of it. And that's what I did,
And you had your wife and you had 2 kids, so you did have some support encouraging.
Yeah.
I mean, I am all for military training for everybody. I think it really gets you to look at the world in a different perspective. And I really enjoyed, I was in the Air Force 8 years, and I really enjoyed it. And my kids, well, I have 2 boys active duty right now with their wives. And I think it creates a sense of patriotism, a sense of self-sufficiency, brotherhood, sisterhood. And thank you so much for your service and for your grandpa, and for all of our listeners that are veterans and on active duty right now. I have a very patriotic bone in me, and it's thank you for that. So it gave you purpose, though, because a lot of people are like, basic training, it manipulates you and changes you, but it does change you. It changes you, I think, for the good. I've seen a lot of young men going in that were like you, that had no direction, and came out and have made extraordinary men.
Yeah, I think it was what I needed. I think when you come from an extreme background, you also need an equally extreme force to change you into something better, right? And that's what the Army did for me. It put me in a position to kind of bring out what I didn't know existed on the inside of me. And because of my upbringing, I didn't believe in myself. I didn't think that I could do anything great. And then I entered the Army, and they challenged me. I mean, even the small, like, okay, we'll just say obstacle course, right? They call it a confidence course in the Army. They don't call it an obstacle course like the civilians do, right? It's a confident. Why? Because that's a mile stretch, or however long, depending on the one. And when you get done with that, you are fairly confident that, in yourself, because look what you just did, right? And so little things like that began to build up in me, and I started saying, "Oh, I can run 3 miles. I can run 5 miles. I can do this confidence course. You know what? Let's see if I can do it faster." Right. And it all kind of just built up for me. And then I went all in on myself, right? Like I immersed myself in being a soldier. I began to fall in love with the life, the mission. It gave me a purpose. Like you just said, I lacked purpose. I lacked a reason to get up. I mean, yes, I had a wife and I had kids, right? But I'm a firm believer that you have to also have something outside of that that drives you to something bigger than your life, right? Because if that's why there's so many people that they work a 9 to 5, they get off, they drink beer, they go to sleep, and they wake up and they do it, and they don't do anything more than that, and they justify it by, well, I'm taking care of my family. But when it's bigger than you, when there's countries that need liberation, when there's millions of people riding on your dedication, on your service, it's a game changer, right? And so it does it motivates you to be the very best version of you every single day, not just once, not just twice, but on a daily basis, on a consistent basis. So that's what it did for me. And I ended up becoming a sniper, which is a fairly hard thing to do. And then later on in my career, towards the end, I actually was accepted to, or chosen to, be an instructor for combat applications, and I instructed all 4 branches of the military. I mean, this is the guy that had a learning disability, a crackhead for a mother, had no confidence in himself, and now I'm teaching all, not just the Army, all 4 branches. And then I started teaching the FBI, U.S. Marshals, SWAT teams. I mean, you name it. I had people flying all over the place to train with someone who was the lesser of most that would be in that position, right? And so it goes to show you what you're capable of. And if it wasn't for the Army, I would have never found out that I could do that. I could be that. I could really believe in myself and believe in that belief, right? I think there's something special in that as well. So,
well, and I was like the team aspect of it too, where when you're in your own life by yourself and isolated, which a lot of people have been, especially the last couple of years, you only see through the funnel. You can't see the big picture. And that's what I think the military did for a lot of us. It said, okay, so you can be the best you can be. You can be, and we can see it for you. And here's some tools and some training and some support and a kick in the pants. But you can do it. And that was what was so extraordinary. Did you have any weapons training prior to that? I grew up with guns. But
no, not really. I mean, besides a BB gun and a blow dart, that was really it. I didn't have anything going into the Army. So but they actually tell you that people that have zero knowledge of shooting do better in the military because they have nothing to base what they're learning off of. So they're just a sponge. And so I was a spy, and I became a sponge to everything.
And did they pick you out after some weapons testing? I mean,
yeah. I didn't go to the one at Fort Benning. I went to a special operations sniper course, and so there was a lot of prerequisites. You already had to be a good shooter. People think that you go to snipers school to learn how to shoot. That's not the case. You already have to have a very good working knowledge and operational skills behind the weapon. So I already had immersed myself in all of that and done some was it long range marksmanship and things of that nature prior to being able to get this spot. So yeah.
Well, I wish my late husband was a very good with guns, and when he passed, we actually had a Lampua. Where we shot that. He always figured if he had to do perimeter security on top of the tabernacle in Salt Lake or something, he was going to be able to shoot like miles out. And it was incredible to the point where it got a little scary because he had so many weapons. And when he passed, I had to get rid of so many things. But he said the guys that were trained were the best. They knew what to do. And we won't get political on gun control, but I know that I grew up with training. My kids have grown up with training. I remember my daughter when she was probably 5 or 6 up in Vermont with my dad sitting in the backyard with a BB gun. And boy, she turned into Annie Oakley. But she knew how to protect herself.
Yeah.
And that's the point. And so as a sniper, that's incredible. I know there are a lot of people that would be listening that be like, oh, I want to meet him.
Yeah.
I know my boys, my boys are pilots, but they rely on those guys that
We rely on them. So
you're right. Yeah, exactly.
it's a working relationship.
There's the teamwork. So you were in the Army for all those years, but then the Army decided to release you.
Yeah.
What happened there?
So it started with a deployment to Iraq. I ended up going off of a roof and I landed head first. My nods or my night vision went into my eye. My neck, it just really messed up my whole head, neck, my eye. The jelly around my retina was dented and really in bad shape, but they couldn't do surgery because it was the way it was positioned. If there was a high risk that I would go blind. So they were just like, you're going to see spots probably for the rest of your life. And it just is what it is. And then, I think because I had such a physical job, once that first injury really hit me, it was like just, I don't know, like a daisy chain of effects. And then I ended up having multiple surgeries and I was trying to fight to stay in and they were fighting to send me away. And so there was this back and forth for probably a year where I'm trying to stay in. I'm trying to prove that I'm okay. I'm like, hey, give me an assignment. I don't have to do anything crazy. I can be an instructor. I can do, just continue, keep me as an instructor. I'll be good. And they were just like, no, you have too many issues. We would, be remiss if we kept you. And so they ended up sending me actually to the Wounded Warrior facility in Fort Belvoir. And then from there, I was going back and forth to Walter Reed to get treatment because they can't release you without getting you in a decent place. And then once I was released, they actually retired me. They gave me an honorable medically retired me. And then they sent me to, it's called polytrauma in the Veterans Affairs Hospital in Richmond, Virginia. And so polytrauma, they deal with people that have combat related injuries, a lot of, people that have lost limbs or have had serious injuries like myself, where, they're going to need, time even after they're released to get fixed. So I went there for about a year or so, maybe a little longer than a year. And then I just started this journey, but it was not good. I was lost. I was lost.
You're not in a good spot. I've heard that from many veterans that once they get out, my brother retired as a colonel, and I saw it in him because you lose your purpose and you lose your identity. Once the uniform comes off, now you're just anybody and they don't know your history. And I know my brother went from colonel to Mr. in an organization that had no military, had no idea of what he'd been through for 20 something years. And it was damaging in many ways. Talk about PTSD from Afghanistan. You get it when you go into the corporate world.
You do. So
you actually fell into that, though, the depression and where did you go from there? Because you still have a family.
Yeah. And so, it's crazy because I didn't even touch on the fact that I have 4 kids. And 3 of them are special needs. My daughter had a stroke when I was stationed in Germany, and we were about to gear up and go to Afghanistan, and she ended up having a stroke while we were training. Actually, just like a workout. We were doing 2-a-days to get ready for the deployment. And then I have 2.
She was
years old when she had it. Yes.
That story to me was amazing because again, you had your wife there.
Yeah.
But tell the story of your daughter.
That's probably what inspires me the most. Yeah. To be the person that you're talking to right now. I had my phase, but so my daughter, I'm at a gym and I get a call that there's something wrong, with my daughter. You have to come to school. Now, granted, that morning she skipped to school with her mom. Right? Like everything was fine. It was a normal day. She was happy. She's always been just happy, go lucky girl. And I get there and there's an ambulance and they're strolling her into the ambulance and my wife is getting in the back and no one's telling me anything, right? They take off and they're like, get in the car, you follow us. So I follow them. The ambulance stops. She's convulsing so bad that they have to stop the ambulance, get in the back, and do some type of service to her to try to control the convulsing. As I get out my car, the other ambulance guy was like, no, you just get back in your car. So I'm like, I still have no idea what's going on. We get to the first hospital and they misdiagnose her. They tell us that she's just having seizures, no big deal. And it was a very frustrating time because there was a big we went to a hospital off post because so in Germany, the post that I was on, they didn't have like a very advanced hospital. So, and then they have Krankenhauses, which is like, I don't know, like, what is that?
Like a clinic.
Overnight, the 24-hour care hospitals, it's like that, right? So they don't do major things. So then we go to the next level of the hospital, which is kind of like your community hospital in America. There's a language barrier. There's a lot that is happening during this time that I think contributed to her not getting the proper care. Either way, the next day, a neurologist shows up and is assigned her case. And as he looks over the files, he's like, did you guys give her an MRI? And they're like, no. He's like, what? So he gives her an MRI and he realizes that she had a very massive stroke, like an adult-sized stroke in a 5-year-old body. Her brain was completely swollen and they needed to do an emergency surgery. They craniotomy, which they take half the skull out and they release the pressure of the brain. And she had about 3 hours to live at that point. So they sent us to Hamburg, Germany, and they have a specialty hospital in Hamburg that does, it specializes in the severe adolescent cases. We get there, they rush her. And what I love about Germany is they don't ask the parents. They're doing what's best for the kid, regardless of what you want. So they had her. Once we got there, we were in the waiting room, and then we saw her on a stretcher to go to surgery. And they said, "Are you coming or not?" It wasn't sign this. It wasn't new, right? So they put her in surgery. They cut her skull out. They do a whole bunch of other tests while she's under, and I'll never forget this. The doctor in broken English says, "I don't know how to say this, but your daughter's never going to walk or talk or eat ever again. She's going to be a vegetable." And I'm like, okay, well, this went left. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? And he said that the stroke was very severe and it wasn't treated nearly as quickly as it should have. So there was a Ronald McDonald House, and I love Ronald McDonald because they've supported us this entire time, both in Germany and in the States. They gave us somewhere to live because we didn't live in Hamburg, right? Like there was nowhere to stay. So they let us stay there. And I remember my wife and I just crying and just screaming because we didn't know what to think. As this is happening, my wife is 9 months pregnant and she bursts. So I have my daughter fighting for her life in one room, and I have my daughter giving birth. My wife giving birth in another room.
And then you have another child.
Yeah, and he's sitting, and my oldest is sitting in the ICU room.
How old is he?
He was like 10, I think, at the time.
Oh, wow.
So I'm skating back and forth, trying to figure this whole thing out. And it was a lot. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was a lot. And I was basically on autopilot. There wasn't a lot of thought behind. It was just reaction, right? Reacting to everything. What do I have to do? Okay, I'll do this. Okay, I'll do this. You say go left, I go left, right? I felt like a private all over again. I didn't have any control, right? I was just, and it is a very helpless feeling. The surgeons there decided that we needed to go to stateside. There was a rare disease that they believed caused the stroke. They had only seen this, and I think she was the second or third child that they had ever seen this happen to, and they felt like they weren't, one, prepared enough, and then two, they felt like the language barrier would be hard for her when it came to rehabilitation, that she would be better off in an American rehabilitation center where she understood that wasn't another problem to fight. And so there was a problem with that. We have a newborn baby with no paperwork, right? I mean, literally just fresh days old, right? So they forced my wife to stay with the baby in Germany. And my oldest son, my daughter, and myself get on a medevac flight with wounded soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they fly us to Walter Reed when it was still in DC. It's in Bethesda, Maryland now. So we get to Walter Reed, and I have no home. I've been in Germany for the last 6 years, right? I have nothing. I have a bag of clothes that it doesn't even have, it's probably not even 3 days worth, right? And I have, my 10-year-old, and I'm like, oh my God. So I call my wife's mother, and they drive to DC. They pick him up. They see, my daughter, and then they take him. They enroll him in school where they live. They were lifesavers, but we're separated. I have my oldest son somewhere. I have my daughter in another country. I mean, my wife and my daughter and my newborn in another country, and me and my daughter are living in Walter Reed in this isolated room. So it was a very hard time. And back then, there wasn't like the technology that we have now. There was, we didn't have Zoom or anything like that. So I had to go and get a ride just to get a cell phone, just to put international minutes, just to talk to my wife for a couple minutes. So it was a very challenging time. And I'll never forget that they reiterated what the German doctor said, that she would never be able to do anything. She would be a vegetable. And I just told my daughter, I said, look, I can't promise you anything other than we're going to fight. And that's what we're going to do. I don't care what they say. We're going to fight. So she had all of these stuffed animals in the room that they had given her. And I held her up, and she only had one good arm. And I said, throw them against the wall. Just throw them against the wall. Little did I know she was actually gaining strength in her legs and in her core as she did that. And I would do this 4 or 5 times a day. I would take her legs and I would move them like she was walking, and we would go up and down the halls. We were stuck in a isolation ward with other really extreme patients. Like we had leukemia, children with leukemia, and all kinds of different. So it was very restricted. But I didn't care. I was like, we're gonna move down these. If they're gonna restrict us, we're gonna use every inch of this space. And that's what I did. And I just probably about 20 times a day, I would tell her, you will walk, you will walk, you will walk. And about 4 months into it, she took her first steps. She was able to speak. It was not, there was some hiccups in it, but going from nothing to that was a win. And she was able to use her one good hand and eat and feed herself in those 4 months. So she accomplished everything that the doctors said that she wouldn't do. And they would come in daily, like multiple times a day with their team, and tell us everything that she couldn't do and everything she wouldn't do. And this is why. And I just kept on telling her, don't believe him. Don't believe him. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And she did it. And so by the time we went to an in-house rehabilitation center, she was already ahead of the curve. She was already doing what they didn't think she was going to do. So we already had a leg up. And then there was the next problem, and that was vasculitis is what they believe caused this massive stroke. And vasculitis is usually found in older humans and usually in the lower extremities. What happened is this rare, very aggressive strain of vasculitis went through a hole in her heart that never closed when she was born. It clogged 3 of the 4 major arteries that led to her brain. And then that restricted the right side of her brain. and then the stroke happened on her left side, right? Because it does a reverse. If it's the right side that's affected, the left side is the one that stops moving and stops working. So it was super aggressive, and it continued to spread up through the right side of her brain. They put her on steroids to kill it, and that was some. In those cases, a high dose of steroids kills vasculitis, right? That's the remedy. It did not work. It was not touching it. This thing just kept moving and moving, and what they were scared of is the left side of her brain being affected, and then that's like the learning center. So that's then she really will be a vegetable. So they started her on chemo, and she was doing the highest dose of steroids that her body could have. And she was on chemotherapy for 6 months, 7 months, something like that. And so she was getting both of those treatments to try to eradicate the vasculitis that was so aggressive on her brain. And what's crazy about it is it didn't eradicate it, it just paralyzed it. And when you do an MRI of her brain, even to this day, we just have one from about a year ago, the entire right side is just black. It's just it doesn't function. So her entire right side doesn't function, only her left side. And they literally stopped it just in the nick of time, which I believe is the universe at work, because God knows our lives would be completely different if both sides didn't function. So yeah, and so now she's 17. She actually works for the YMCA at the daycare center doing what she loves. She trains dogs on her own. She has learned how to do so much with just her. She still can't use her left arm, but she has learned how to do ponytails and all kinds of stuff that is, we take for granted when we have both arms. She does it with one hand. She ties her shoes, all kinds of things. So she's a remarkable young lady.
Well, and the whole thing, you could have gone from the devastation of can't do a darn thing and just listen to what they said and just give up.
Yeah.
But you didn't. There's no victim here.
No.
Let's move on. And that's what I love about you in the whole tenacity part. And honestly, I'm thinking in the background there's a Mrs. Tenacity.
There is.
And I would love to hear her story too, because she's on the other side of this. She's got the baby, she's got the older son, and then you do have another child, all boys, 3 boys and a girl.
I have 3 boys and 1 girl. Yep.
Me too.
Yeah.
But so she's on the other side holding up, because you've got a lot happening with you, and then she's this whole family situation could have knocked down a lot of people, and then to say, I give up.
Yeah.
But you didn't. And that's what you didn't. And you taught your daughter not to give up. So talk about a confidence course.
Yeah.
Your life has been a confidence course. And it doesn't happen overnight, right?
No, it's progression. And it's a decision, right? Like, you can settle, but you get everything that everyone else is saying, or whatever that situation looks like, right? So if we had listened, if we had settled for what the doctor said, then we get nothing. We get a daughter who we have to spoon feed for the rest of her life. We get a daughter who misses out on school events, on, just living life, no decency of life, really, And to me, it was unacceptable not to at least try. Right. I mean, there's something crazy special that happens when you decide just to go all in and go for it. In sports, they call it leave it all on the court, right? Or all on the field. But you give every ounce of who you are. You just say, I don't care. I don't care. It's not going to be this way for the lack of effort. Right. And usually when you give that effort, the results come in your favor. 90% of my life, probably more than that, if I've given the effort, I've gotten phenomenal results. Great results. And so my daughter is just an example of that. And you're right. My wife, she is the glue of the family, right? Her story, I'm encouraging her to write a book. And, I think that we're in an agreement, right, that she's going to do it, because you're right. Like, there was a point where there was 3 kids in therapy, right? And they were going to therapies. They had sessions, I think, 2 to 3 times a day. Monday through Friday. Sometimes there were additional therapies like activity therapy type stuff on
Okay.
Saturdays.
The other additional side of this story is that your two boys have autism.
Yeah, yeah, and that's even crazy. And they are on two different sides of the spectrum. I have one that would cry for 4 hours. Like when I say cry, like
Screaming.
hitting themselves, scratching, like just completely meltdown, right? And for I didn't even know a human being could do that for 4 hours and not like lose or hurt themselves, right? He would go and nonstop. And then I have another one who can't speak, didn't talk for 7 years, you know. So, and then we have my daughter who we're still having to work with every single day because there's just a small time frame to enact change before things become permanent, right? And so uh, and then I get injured.
Yeah, because now, well, you're out of the service at this point, and we talked about motorcycles earlier. That was your basic freedom, wasn't it? It was the opportunity for.
Oh yeah, well yeah, and I mean I was already injured coming out of the army. I was, and so she had to juggle all of that, and then by the time I get out, they have found like a system, right? Like they were okay. The my my son who wasn't speaking uh was starting to speak. He wasn't super clear, and they still considered him nonverbal. But to us, he was speak. We could understand because we live with him. And then we had gotten my youngest son who was screaming his his guts out. We had got him down to about an hour and a half at a time. So these are wins for us at this point. And so things are going better. And then my daughter is doing well. She's kind of still going to therapy, but she's confident. She's outside of that window. So now it's just kind of reassuring that she can learn life, right? And learn how to function with what she has in this life. And when I lose my purpose, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back for me. That was probably the darkest place in my life because for the first time in my life, I was doing something that I loved, I was good at. It brought me confidence. It taught me who I was. And now you're telling me that for serving my country, for going to war for you guys, you're going to kick me out. And I felt that I was more capable than anybody that they would put in my spot, right? So it's a little arrogance, but it is what it is, right? That's what I believed. I believe that they didn't have the basis to kick me out, right? And make me, and they called it retirement, but to me, they were just kicking me out. They were done with me, right? I had given them what they wanted, and because I couldn't do more for them, they kicked me to the curb. And so I became angry. I became just bitter because that was my sense of purpose, outside of my kids. That was my purpose. And I began to drink like a fifth of whiskey a night. It started because of the nightmares, man. Like, I don't know if you've heard the saying, an idle mind is the devil's playground, but it's very true. When I went through a little bit of the PTSD before I got out, but not to a super large extent, right? When I got out, it like just everything rushed in, right? I'm talking nightmares from my childhood, things that I didn't even think were an issue, right? That I had moved past. I did not move past it. It was very real. And I was not able to go to sleep. I was getting an hour of sleep a night. So the drinking started with me trying to just go to sleep, right? Just get some type of decent rest at night. And that quickly turned into an addiction. And again, I'm still my mother's child. So I didn't even take into account that she has a very large addictive personality. And so I fell into that trap. And next thing you know, it turns into a fifth of whiskey a night. I start smoking marijuana, which again, I know that a lot of people use that and it works good for them. But for someone who is using it not as therapy, but as an escape, it doesn't matter what you use. You can replace it with money, with work, with whatever drug you want, because anything can be a drug, right? If we're using it for the wrong reasons, for the wrong purposes, it's all the same. Okay. I was just numbing my mind.
Yeah.
And I did not want to face my stuff. I was just running from it all. So I start taking up riding motorcycles to combat my mindset, right? To give me something that's fresh, that's, real, that will give me some life. And it was working. I loved it. I could get on. It was just me and the wind and this bike. And I loved it. And in 2015, 2018. So I got out in 2015. In 2018, I'm riding and I'm making a left turn. My light turns green. I'm making this left turn. There's an 18-year-old kid on his cell phone. I don't know what app he was on, but he was more into that than he was what was in front of him. He had a red light. He didn't even touch his brakes. At 45 miles an hour, he plows into me. And most people thought I was going to pass away, but I didn't. I was able to survive it, obviously, because we're talking. But it was definitely a time that you thought would have changed me, right? But it didn't. It did not. I got hit, and I doubled down on what I was already doing. Except this time, now I had oxy, right? So now I have oxy, and I'm taking that, right? And 2 years later, so I decide I'm going to face my fear. I'm going to get back on the motorcycle. So I get back on the motorcycle and I'm riding, but this time I have 5 other people with me. We're all on Harley Davidsons. How you don't hear 5, 6 Harley Davidsons is out of this. I don't know what they were doing in that car, right? I have no earthly idea. But this minivan in the middle lane swerves over at 65 miles an hour and plows into me. I didn't even have time to do anything. There was a Jersey barrier right beside me. He hit me so hard that my bike was implanted into the Jersey barrier. It never even fell back down. There was construction work where they were expanding the road to the left of that. So I flew over the Jersey barrier and into the construction zone. I had a couple military guys on the ride with me. So they gave me first aid and they kind of, controlled the situation until the ambulance got there. On the way to the first hospital, I flatlined. They revived me. And when they do the assessment, they realize, hey, we can't serve him here, right? There's nothing we can do. He needs to go to a trauma hospital or a trauma center. Sorry. So they medevac me to VCU in Richmond, Virginia, which is, like the medical mecca in Richmond. And so they send me there and I go into emergency surgery and they open me up and they realize that the MRI didn't show the extensive damage that I had. So they had to close me up, get more stuff, and then put me into another surgery. As I'm waiting for the second surgery, I flatlined again. And I don't remember much of this part. I remember waiting to go in to the surgery room. And then I remember them telling me ask me questions. And I thought I was talking to them like I'm talking to you, but I wasn't. I was like gibberish talking. They thought I was having a stroke and I wasn't. I was just, flatlining, and I remember waking up and 2 nurses are holding me and there's a fuzzy, I think he was a doctor. Everything was real fuzzy, but I could hear everything clear, like crystal clear. I could hear them talking about saving me. I could hear them talking about my heart rate being 190. And that it needed to go down or else, I'm at risk of stroking out and, all of this stuff happening. And then I wake up in ICU. So I was in ICU for 7 days and it was kind of the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And I know a lot of people might say, I don't know how this could be a great thing, but I was on a path that wasn't good for me, my family. I was ruining my relationship with my wife, who's my best friend, right? I've known her and we've been together since like 10th grade, right? So she is my life. And then I have these kids that I've fought for, I've helped, I've invested my life into, and I'm not present for them now, right? Like all of a sudden, the guy that they know isn't even really there, right? I'm just a robot drowning his sorrow and his pain daily. And so when I was in this ICU room, I had to face the man in the mirror. There was no drugs. There was no one could come see me. It was COVID. So, not even my wife could come in. I had no cell phone. It got destroyed or lost on the bike. Whatever happened to it, I don't know. I didn't have it. So I had reruns and I had myself. And you end up, and time is seamless in these situations, right? Like 4 o'clock in the morning is no different than 10 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the evening, right? Like there is, when this is your life 24/7, time, it really goes out the window and it's all or streamlined, sorry. And so I began to really face me and tracing the roots of why I was the way I was, why I was drinking so much, why I was, trying to numb everything instead of being the man that I know that I was and just face it and conquer it, right? Because that's the real me. The real me faces something, it conquers it, and it moves forward, right? I don't let life get the best of me because I never wanted to turn out like my mom. So that was like one of my motivators, right? But I had turned into my mom, right? Like I was an exact replica of how she was, just not as intense. So as I did that, I really began to solve a lot of my issues, right? And I realized that I had a lot of things I didn't deal with. I had just moved past, but I never really dealt with those things. And so it allowed me to face them, I call them skull drag them, right? I skull drag these things, right? And I left that hospital because I was in the hospital altogether 14 days. And after those 14 days, I was not the same man. I wasn't. I don't know if you read a lot of Napoleon Hill, but in Outwitting the Devil, he talks about hypnotic rhythm. And I was in a negative state of hypnotic rhythm. And he talks about you have to have something massive happen to get you out of that rhythm. That's why alcoholics will know that they're dying and continue to drink. They're in this hypnotic rhythm. They can't help themselves but to do what they're doing. And this was my way out. And it was. And I turned 180 degrees. I started mastering my mindset. I fell in love with all of that, right? And so at the end state, now I'm where I'm at today. I fell in love with personal growth because it saved my life. Journaling saved my life. I couldn't walk. That's where I really started writing. I didn't even know I was that good at writing until I started writing. And so I fell in love with that. I fell in love with just being able to express myself, being able to know me. So that's kind of how it all went down with that. Yeah.
Well, it's an extraordinary story, and there's so many things to it. And I'm relating to what my audience might be thinking too. And many of them have had something happen in their lives that to them is overwhelming, and they just stop. They just quit. And they're scared to move forward. It's kind of like I heard you say that one time after the first accident, you were scared to go through an intersection.
Yeah, I was.
Well, you can't drive if you don't go through an intersection.
Right.
So you have to face those fears, and fear is just false expectations appearing real.
Yep.
And I have a friend of mine got me on a book by Susan Jeffers, Dr. Susan Jeffers, and it's basically face your fears. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it, and don't let what other naysayers and the negative nannies say to you, because you'll stay there. You'll stay in the negative. A friend of mine this morning from England put out a little video, and she's a positive psychologist, and she said our brains are wired for the negative. If I ask you, what do you want to do? What is your dream? You sit there and go, I don't know. But if you write down a list of what you don't want to do, you can write down 100 of them right away.
Yeah, that's the same reason why. How many people stop to see the sunset versus how many people stop to see an accident or a police officer pulling someone over, right? We're hardwired in this way. It's just like fear isn't a bad thing. It's an indicator, just like your oil light coming on in your car, right? It's telling you, hey, check this out, right? So that way you can approach it, not stay away from it, but approach it the right way. That way it doesn't hurt you, right? So when we change our perception of what these things are, we are able to get through it, because you're right. You can't drive if you're scared of an intersection, right? But I can use this to be aware, hyper aware, to know my surroundings better, to use it in the manner in which it was supposed to be in the first place, and that's just allow me to move without getting hurt, right? And so when you apply all of these things like fear the right way, right, and look at it the right way, it's no longer something that stops you. It actually helps you progress in a smoother manner.
And we're only asking folks to move forward one step at a time.
Yeah.
We didn't get to where we are, all at once. It was over time. And I say, take your pain, turn it into your purpose, and then passion.
Yep.
You've done that, and it's extraordinary. And I give kudos to your oldest son.
Yes.
Who, through all of that, bless his heart, he must have felt like, well, who am I? I'm the only one in the family that didn't have something happen. Bless his heart, he was there. He was the support. And so your son and your wife, kudos to them. Mr. Tenacity has a Mrs. Tenacity and all 4 little Tenacities. And it's determination, and it's positive thinking, empowerment, and you're doing great things, sir. So how can people get a hold of you? How can they listen to you?
Yeah, so my podcast is the Legend of You podcast, and it's on all the major platforms. You can reach me at mrtenacity.com. You can email me at mrtenacity40@gmail.com. Facebook, Chad Osinga. I'm Mr. Tenacity, I think, on Instagram, and I don't know all the little thingies, but all the social, I'm pretty much on Mr. Tenacity. You'll find me. If you type in the hashtag Go Kill It, that is my hashtag. So that's a good way to find me as well. And I'm on Authority Magazine as well. So I have several, like 7 or 8 articles there as well. So you can find me any of those areas.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, and listen to Ron Rappaport. My friend Ron Rappaport has It's a Rap with Rap, and he actually something at the end of my show we talked about that, but he interviewed you. Yes. And we've had some fun experiences, and I'm going to connect you with some of my veteran friends that have also been guests on my show. I think we're all we have this synergy. We have these circles that are now overlapping, and that's important, because it's not about the number of people that we can affect, it's the one.
Yeah,
I heard you say this. It's
yes. Yeah, that's all I care about.
I know you will have affected one person from today's story. Me, anybody. But,
well, I really appreciate you having me. It was an honor. It really was, and a pleasure. You're a great host. And I hope that your audience can relate to this and extract some type of value that they can apply in their life. So
absolutely. So thank you for your service to government, to America. Thank you for your service to your family. And thank you for your service to me today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. And you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Yes, you too.
Thank you for listening to Stand Up and Speak Up. We are dedicated to encouraging you to remove the mask of embarrassment and to being your best self. If you are the victim of a scam or cybercrime, please visit againstscams.org for assistance and guidance about options and recovery. SCARS, the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, is an incorporated nonprofit crime victims assistance organization based in Miami, Florida, supporting scam victims worldwide. If you can, make a small donation to help victims around the world receive the help they need. This episode has been sponsored by BenfoComplete.com, a vitamin supplement company that supports happy and healthy hands and feet for those with neuropathy. If you or anyone you know struggles with the pins and needles or numbness in their hands and feet, check out our benfotiamine products at BenfoComplete.com. Use the special code STANDUP for a 5% discount on your purchase. Again, thank you for being with us today. Go to my website, The Woman Behind the Smile, for additional resources and information. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and enjoy the replays. My books are all available on Amazon.com and Audible, and I encourage you to join us again. Have a great day. My past guest, Ron Rappaport, two-time male breast cancer survivor and lymphedema thriver, hosts an awesome podcast titled It's a Wrap with Rap, which features guests that have overcome life's challenges and adversities and can inspire, motivate, and educate us on an assortment of topics. This is a podcast with purpose and worth checking out. It can be heard on most major platforms and on Ron's website, itsawrapwithrap.com.